Hey, welcome back to another episode of It's a Football Thing. I'm your host, RJ, the Balanced Blue, joined by my fellow co-host, champion mates, Rob the Red Devil, Scott the Gooner. We are here for the midweek special to talk about the player of the month in the English Premier League, as well as the manager of the Premier League during the November and December 22 period, respectively. Lots of debate, boys, because there's a few hot names in this list and a few question marks, I think it's fair to say. Scott, I'll go to you first, my man. How you doing?
Yeah, doing well, man. Doing well. Looking forward to unpacking this. Bit tricky tonight because obviously this is player and manager of the month for November, December. We had this little thing called a World Cup in the middle. So bit of a challenge having to take your mind way back and think about who's most deserving, but there's lots of deserving players. So excited.
Yeah, well, we hope we won't trip you up on that one, but Scott. So Rob, over to you, mate. How you doing?
Good, thanks, boys. Yeah, look, I always like these player, the managers of the month kind of thing. A lot of discussion builds up around it. Some people agree, some people don't agree. And that's the best thing about it, mate. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, go Scott. Yeah,
no, go on, man. You first.
No, all I was just going to say is what I love about this, because I was the one who championed for this particular topic. A, it's reoccurring. B, it's polarizing and divisive because you combine club rivalry and patriotism, but also as pure footballing enthusiasts, you really want to be objective. Who was the best player of the month? Which manager impressed us the most? So it's trying to balance those two competing tensions. Over to you, Scott.
Yeah, let's start with the gaffers. And while we have a look at our contenders, boys, I just want to kind of get into your heads a little bit. I know when I'm trying to think of the manager of the month, these are the things I factor in. I factor in, first of all, what were their fixtures? Yeah. So did they play 4 teams at the bottom in the month? Or did they have some really tough away matches? I look at the fixtures. Then I, of course, look at their tactics, like how much did their tactics influence results? And the final thing I look at is their squad. So for me, I'll always look at someone like Thomas Frank a little bit more friendly than I would look at, Arteta or Klopp. Because I think out of these 4 managers, Arteta and Klopp have probably the most star-studded squads, and you would probably say Thomas Frank has the weakest squad. But I factor that in when I look at the manager of the month. Do you factor in anything different, Robbie?
No, look, I agree with nearly exactly the same points. I'd say the first thing is fixtures, who they're up against, or how hard the competition is that they've had to face. And yeah, obviously results is a massive one because consistency is also key. But yeah, again, what you said, the teams, mate, the firepower of the team, injuries, if they're going up against full strengths or not full strengths. So yeah, I think you covered it quite well, man.
RJ, have I missed anything that you use in your criteria?
Not missed, because I think it's spot on what you said in terms of the importance of those things. But I think you're talking about the punching above your weight factor in terms of squad depth in one sense. But for me, what I suppose trying to balance it out from the elite team's point of view is that they also tend to have to balance more fixtures because they've got to compete across different competitions, which places more stress and fatigue on the current crop of players. So I think that's also, I know this is Premier League specific and you're judging on results of the Premier League, but ultimately you're using the same set of players that have to compete on multiple fronts. So it's not as straightforward. But yeah, I'll throw that into the mix when I'm looking at this as well.
All right, let's jump in. Let me share with you some information on Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp's team. In the month of December, they beat Aston Villa away 3-1. They also beat Southampton 3-1 in November. They beat Spurs 2-1 in November. And they did beat Napoli in the Champions League as well. So some good results there for Jurgen Klopp's boys. They also beat Leicester 2-1 at the end of December. So they had some good results. They've turned around some poor form. Still, though, Klopp's, spoiler alert, he's not my vote. What have you made of Liverpool? Is he starting to turn them around, Rob?
Look, we've got to try and wind the clock back again to go back to those results. Obviously, we've seen recently. Would say no, definitely. But look, it doesn't really shine as well to me. You look at those results. Most of those teams are under the bottom the bottom half of the table.
Yeah.
I'd say that Tottenham's the one that kind of stands out a little bit. Would you say it was 2-1? And we all know that Tottenham at that point was in a bit of a nosedive themselves. So for me,
Yeah.
he also doesn't get my vote. And I do kind of look towards like the two middle guys there. Yeah, Eddie Howe's and your Thomas Frank. And we all know how much I love the king of the bees, Mr. Thomas Frank there. I'm sure you were telling me before the stream that, a win to City and a couple other big wins there. Anyone that beats City is a massive accomplishment. And when you look at the two squads or star-studded lineup with your Haalands, your De Bruyne's, etc., against, I know Ivan Toney, I'm sure, got on the score sheet. Then they're sprinkled with their few star players down there, but that's a massive accomplishment. So for me, Mr. Frank gets my vote.
Wow, and look,
to be fair, Rob, anybody can beat City, as Chelsea have demonstrated recently. They are an easy beat. But just on the Klopp factor, to your point, Scott, I was looking at also the period before that time, like in October, and actually had a pretty mixed month. So they had some pretty big results, but they also had a couple of shocking ones as well. So they had a bit of a mixed bag in October. So I think part of what gets Klopp's favoritism or inclusion into this list is because they had a pretty big uptick during that month.
Yep.
And at that point in time, they had gotten things back on track. So I think it's warranted that he makes the list because of what they had done. But based on what you boys said in terms of who they had beaten, to me, I'd put the red pen through Klopp for sure.
Looking at my team, we had a big win against West Ham at the end of December, 3-1, London derby. Beat Wolves 2-0. Beat Chelsea 1-0 at the start of November. But we haven't played an awful lot of football. We also, that was in January, we beat Brighton. So Arsenal, for me, have played well, but not quite enough there. Beating Chelsea is good, but that's not really a feat you put on your CV these days. So I'm actually leaning more towards this next gaffer, and I want to talk to you about his results, RJ, and let me know what you think. Newcastle United beat Leicester 3-0 at the end of December. They beat Chelsea 1-0, beat Southampton 4-1. All good results. They also in that time beat Palace on penalties in the EFL Cup, beat Bournemouth in the EFL Cup. And they had some other interesting results in there too. But for me, Eddie Howe and Newcastle, they're that perfect balance of a team performing really well with a team that you wouldn't look at their squad and say these guys are absolute superstars. I think Eddie Howe's doing a brilliant job, and I think he should be acknowledged as the manager of the month. What do you think, though, RJ?
Yeah, I can understand why definitely Arteta has to be in there. You're high flying. You haven't lost. You're guaranteed. It's, death taxes being in that list if you're on top of the Premier League. But you're right. I haven't played too much football. And although they've played well, I wouldn't say they've been, sensational. They definitely are the clear winners in those matches. But anyhow, I think during that time, some of the manner of those results were quite profound. So to me, I'm sort of splitting hairs between them and Brentford, between himself and Thomas Frank, because Thomas Frank, in terms of that squad depth, that punching above your weight factor, I think
100%.
It's so hard to dismiss. And I'm not saying Newcastle have the best squad by far, but they've definitely improved. And I feel less surprised about what Newcastle are doing versus what I continue, to my bemusement, be surprised what Brentford do, because, mate, they sit where they sit, but nobody wants to come up against this team, especially at their home ground. They are a different force to be reckoned with. But for me, I don't know, boys. I'm going to lean more on the Thomas Frank chain because that Man City result was huge. And while they dropped the 3 points against Tottenham, 2-0 up, they could have been up 4-5-0 that game.
Was that 2-2 that game?
2-2 in the end.
So they still took a point against Spurs, but
yeah.
Interesting. So 2 for Thomas Frank, 1 for Eddie Howe from me. That brings us to, gents, the player of the month. Let's have a look. This one, obviously a bigger list. Some excellent plays on there. God, you could give them all an award, couldn't you? But we're only picking one. So, boys, I'm going to ask you to choose your player and make your case for why they should be the player of the month. Let's go with you, Archie.
Has to be the Terminator, in my opinion. There's some quality players. I'm a midfielder at heart, so Casemiro's is got to be a worthy shout. And Odegaard as well, big fan of his at the moment. But Mr. Erling Haaland, I just thought very decisive in those periods of time. We talk about teams dominating, being possession heavy, failing to break down stubborn teams. And let's face it, Man City dominate every match pretty much that they play, and everyone, bar perhaps Liverpool, adopt a very pragmatic approach. So being able to find solutions against these very difficult teams is challenging, but they have found someone that's seamlessly slotted in. Controversially, I'm not sure that they necessarily play their best when he's on the pitch, but they definitely pose a continuous threat, and he can pull a goal from anywhere. And just looking back at that period of time, so November, December, scored a decisive goal against Fulham to get them a 2-1 win. Didn't score against Brentford, which is what made that result against them all the more remarkable. Scored a brace against Leeds during their 3-1 win, and also scored a vital goal in the match against Everton as well to earn them a point. So goals win matches, and this guy scores them in abundance. So for me, he deserves to take this award.
From me, look, I'll go next because I actually changed my mind. I've talked myself out of my original choice, which was Kieran Trippier. I'm going with Martin Odegaard. Thinking back on some of his performances, he was so instrumental in November and December. He got 2 assists in the game against West Ham at home. He got 2 goals against Wolves. And that was a tense game. He really broke that deadlock. Against Chelsea, he was really instrumental in running the midfield. Didn't get a goal and assist. We only won 1-0. But he really pulled strings in that match. He stood up and he made himself counted. And his leadership qualities, to me, have really started to blossom a little bit more. I wasn't the biggest fan of his originally, but for me, 2 goals, 2 assists, hard to argue against that, particularly in such crunch games. So I'm going for my man, Martin Odegaard. Robbie?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's rocket science. I'm definitely going to... For this one, look, I'm being not biased, but I really think Casemiro
You're so biased, Rob.
But you're not biased.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
Look, for starters, it depends what everyone looks at. I mean, if you're going to look at stats, then, depends what stats you're looking at or what areas. For me, Erling Haaland is obviously a shout, but I don't think it's rocket science just to score a goal in a team like City with players surrounding him against... if you look at the teams they beat and he scored against, again, they weren't really the best teams in the comp. Everton, they got a point against.
But they were away, Robbie. Remember, that's not always a straightforward conclusion.
Again, but they are City as well. I'll come back with that. And City,
true.
we all know what City is like as well. But look, and it's like Mr. Balotelli said, I don't know why the postman celebrates when he delivers the mail. That's his job. He's the only striker on end, and his job is to be scoring goals. So again, I think he's doing his job, but I don't think it's rocket scientist to be scoring in a team like City. Casemiro, for me, I just think he's getting my vote for an all-rounder. I think he's just been one of our best transfers. He's been, for our midfield, he's been the real anchor. He's even filled in positions that he shouldn't. He filled in at left centre back the other day, got a clean sheet, and was nearly man of the match. He had 2 assists in that time, 2 goals, 1 off a set piece. He's just been everywhere, mate. He's 30 years old, and he really is, to me, a Rolls Royce. And again, I really am not being biased, but I'd hate to see what happens if we ever lost him, because that's how important he is at the moment.
What a signing. Look, for those of you who are tuning in, make sure you leave in the comments who your player and manager of the month is. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know your views, because we love to see the comments in there and get in touch with you via that. So let us know. Make sure you comment down below your player, your manager of the month. And don't forget to check out, of course, our video dropping Thursday night with the next round of Premier League predictions. Boys, take care. We'll see you after. Enjoy your football.
Ciao.